Hey, I'm at Fort Union Trading Post National Historic Site on the North Dakota-Montana border, and not too far from the Canadian border. This fort, between the about 1820s and the American Civil War, was one of the most important forts for the fur trade. So whether people coming north from the American Great Plains or coming south from Canada, Native Americans brought furs which they would here exchange for metal goods and different finished goods. This fort was really important to the economic expansion of America into this part of the world. That you can see that they have teepees set up to represent the encampments that would have been here in the summer times. The fort back there is where the actual business would have taken place. Let's go inside and have a look. This is really cool in here. Here I am inside of Fort Union. Fort Union is, really cool looking, but it's also a monument to an extremely sad moment in American history. Just as the eastern part of the United States was developing politically and economically and expanding out into this part of the country, this was also the end of a way of life. The native tribes that lived here, including the Mandan, the Assiniboine, and the Cree, they would see their way of life come to an end forever. Over the next few decades, the European and American desire for beaver pelt and later buffalo pelt would spell doom for those two species. Beavers and buffalo were both almost hunted to extinction out here. And then, of course, as more Americans arrived, the natives were displaced off of this land and saw their way of life come to an end forever. The fort was finished in 1829, and just a few years later, in 1832, it would have a famous visitor, George Catlin. George Catlin was an artist and kind of a visionary. He predicted that even though at that point in 1832, the Assiniboine were really excited to have this fort. In fact, it's argued that they may have requested that this fort be built so that they could trade their furs for manufactured goods, but Catlin recognized what was happening, and he would suggest that most of what today are the Great Plains states be set aside as what he called a national park, a place where Native people could continue to live and practice their native way of life. And decades later, his writings would be revisited, and that term national park would be applied to Yellowstone when it became America's first national park. So he has an interesting place in the history of American art and also the history of America's national parks. Hey, so now I'm at Pipestone National Monument in Minnesota. So this is a pretty far detour from North Dakota, but it's all part of the Great Plains. So many of the Great Plains cultures traveled both all the way out to Fort Union as well as here to Pipestone. Now here at Pipestone, as the name suggests, the native cultures quarried a special stone that they used to make pipes. Now this was behavior that was noticed by George Catlin. So George Catlin wasn't just capturing pictures of everyday life and fashion of the natives, he was also very much interested in their history and their culture and their way of life. So George Catlin's interest in the native cultures really help us to understand some of the knowledge that was lost over the rest of the 19th century. So he left us images of them here quarrying the special pipestone. All of this is quartzite. It's hard and worthless. And then all the way down here, we've got a thin layer of pipestone formed over the last billion years. So this is what they were quarrying, and you can see how deep they had to dig to find it. One last fun fact about Fort Union, its most famous visitor was John James Audubon.
who got here from St. Louis at the blistering speed of a mere 48 days. Of course, he's most well known for painting birds, but he was actually here to paint mammals.